Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
My name's Jay Plumback. I'm an alcoholic. Through the grace of God and the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've not found it necessary to take a drink since March 8th of 1974. And I will never be able to truly express the gratitude I feel for that. You know, I could pretty well sit down right now because I told you who I was and what I was. And that's all I need to know today, who I am and what I am. And you gave me the answer about that. I want to thank the committee for asking me. Doug had called me, and the guy that was supposed to talk tonight's a dear friend of mine, a guy named Kip Collins. And Kip and I had been real good friends for a number of years. And Kip died of cancer here, about a month or so ago, a month and a half ago. And Kip and I had talked one day, and he said, Jay, I'm canceling the stuff I'm supposed to be doing. He said, I just can't do it anymore. He said, the pain's just too bad. So Kip had to cancel. And I get a call from Doug, and just full of gratitude. Just gratitude that Doug would think to ask me, and honored that you would have me. I've been to Louisiana before. I've been to your state convention before. I know a lot of you in this room. A lot of you are dear friends of mine. Hell, I even know people from Hog's Breath. Well, they say hog hair, but same damn difference. But anyhow. But I looked around the room after I got here, and, you know, there's people I miss. I remember a guy I met at the very first conference I talked at in Louisiana. It was a guy named Cajun Joe. And Joe came up and he gave me a hug, and he said, it's really good to see you. We're glad you're here. And I miss Joe and a lot of other guys like Joe and gals like Joe. Because Alcoholics Anonymous in Louisiana is just strong and good. And you guys epitomize it, the conference you put on. You know, Gonzales ain't like New York City, and you guys have put on a heck of a conference, and you got a lot of involvement and a lot of enthusiasm. And to be allowed to participate in that is a great honor and a privilege. My job ain't just to tell you how good you are, but to tell you my story, and that's what I'm going to try and do now. I didn't plan on being an alcoholic. I certainly did not plan. I got to get that out of my eyes. I certainly did not plan on being here on a Friday night to tell you about me. My normal mode would have been to be sitting in a bar somewhere talking to you about them. See, that part of the inventory I had down pat long before I got to, hey, put down what they done to you. But I didn't plan on being an alcoholic. I was just a normal guy. I thought I was a normal guy growing up. I thought I always had bad circumstances and lousy timing and situations that didn't work out, but I thought I was normal. I didn't think there was a thing wrong with me, but there was a lot wrong with life. I never felt like I fit in or like I belonged. I was born to an upper middle class family in the suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. My daddy was a news commentator and had a coast-to-coast radio show. He was well known and made a lot of money. My daddy also spent a lot of money, so we didn't get a lot, but I had every opportunity afforded to me that a kid could want. But I never saw it that way. I always felt that they didn't love me. I felt like I wasn't a part of them. And I had that going on long before I took a drink. I was angry as a kid, and I didn't think I was angry. I thought I was normal. Hell, I didn't know I was angry till I was sober a year and a half. Well, I was sitting in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous on a Tuesday night at the New West Esperanza group in West Palm Beach, Florida. That was my home group. And I'd got through with that meeting. I'd done whatever I was supposed to do. And after the meeting, this guy come up to me and he put his arm around my shoulder. His name was John. And he sort of gave me a hug and he looked at me and he said, "Jay, you're a phony. And you're about to get drunk." Now, if I'd been a little less fear-filled, I'd have hit him. And if he'd have been a little smaller. But I knew when he said that he was telling the truth. Because I knew deep in the core of my being that I was a phony. I hadn't had a drink for a year and a half. I had done everything in Alcoholics Anonymous that I was told to do. I didn't drink. I asked for help in the morning. I thanked God at night. I went to meetings when I could. I done everything. In that group, when I joined that group, I did what they told me to do when I joined it. When I joined that group, the first thing they had me do was shake hands. That was perfect. I was vibrating anyhow. So I stood at the door and just shook, and And then after that got a little better, they let me wash the ashtrays. Back then, every group was a smoking group. There wasn't nothing. It was just, in fact, when I got to AA, I thought y'all had found the cure for alcoholism, lung cancer. I mean, I said, shit, you couldn't see the second row back then. And those of you who've been around know what I'm talking about. After I got done with washing ashtrays, I graduated to washing coffee cups. Now, there wasn't any environmental things or social rightness. You just had ceramic coffee cups, and he washed them. So I didn't like that group too much anyhow, so I mixed the ashtrays and the coffee cups together. They didn't know about it, but I did, and I got a real perverse thrill out of that. But I'd done everything in that group. I was sort of like a poster child in AA. I'd done everything except be treasurer. I'm sober over 39 years, and I still ain't been treasurer. I keep thinking, maybe my group will hear one of these talks one of these days. Now, we had a treasurer run off with our treasury a few months ago, so I wouldn't have been no virgin at it, but but I ain't been treasurer. But I've done everything except work the steps. And John took me home with him that night, and he talked to me about Alcoholics Anonymous. And he asked me what I'd done with the steps of AA, and I told him I had worked them. I'd applied them to my life, as the book said to do. Because in the book, it says working with somebody or helping somebody with them is one thing, but many of us don't have that opportunity. And I put myself in that position because I went to sea for a living. So rather than take advantage of people when I was there, if that's for me, I'm not answering it. I went to sea for a living, and that's why I grabbed that thing in the book that said, well, work them by yourself. And I tried to. I tried to apply the steps the way they're written, but it got me what the book said it'd get me. It said, half measures avail is nothing. And that's what it got me, nothing. It kept me from taking a drink, but I was stark raving crazy. And then John asked me, though, he said, well, how'd you work step one? And that's why I admitted I was powerless over alcohol. He said, what does that mean to you? Well, I had accepted what the doctor had written. I knew that I had that thing in my brain that was different than other people. I had that thing going on in my head that said, this time I can take a drink and I'll be all right. This time I can take a drink and I won't go there, or I won't do that, or I won't say that. And I'd believe that thing in my head, and I'd take that drink, and then I'd go there, do that, and keep drinking. Because it set and play that allergy that only alcoholics have. Dr. Silkworth uses words. He called it a phenomenon of craving. Now, I'm unscarred pretty much by education, so I didn't know what phenomenon meant. I had to look it up. It means I don't know. So I don't know about what I don't know. I had this phenomenon of craving. And this allergy would go into play, and it means I'd have to take another drink. And I explained to John what I got out of that, and that I believed that I had this allergy of the body and the obsession of the mind. And I knew that I had this thing called alcoholism. I said, and then I went on to step 2. He said, wait a minute, we ain't done with step 1. He said, in step 1, it said, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. He said, there's a dash after that. He said, dash means, wait a minute, there's another thought coming, tied to the first and equally important. that our lives had become unmanageable. And I said, yeah. I said, my life's just fine. He said, let's look at your life. He said, how's your marriage going? Well, my marriage was going so well that I was the most active man in Sex Without Partners in South Florida. That particular self-help group might not have got up here yet, Mike, but it was working good down there. My marriage wasn't going good. I wasn't able to go back to work. I worked on ships, and I'd gone into business. I was at an AA meeting over in a country called Colombo, Sri Lanka, and at that meeting I was sitting in the back with the guys like me that were looking for a hustle and didn't want to drink but didn't want to do nothing else. And I found a couple of guys that had the same kind of plans I had, and we went into business. We went into the import-export business. We began exporting out of Sri Lanka and importing into the United States. Not drugs or something exotic like that, semi-precious gemstones. Now, I was a marine engineer. I didn't know nothing about gemstones. I learned quick. They called that smuggling. Because we didn't pay taxes, we didn't have invoices. I just smuggle them out and smuggle them in. Go into New York and hustle them out and sell them and buy some more and do it again. And I'd wound up with a bunch of junk at the end and all my money gone and on the verge of bankruptcy, trouble in every area of my life. Financially, employment-wise, marriage-wise, spiritually, I was bankrupt. John says, does that at all resemble unmanageability? And I knew what he was talking about. And I accepted step one in its entirety. I completely surrendered. I was powerless over alcohol and my life had become unmanageable. And it became clear to me that Bill was not talking about unmanageability related to drinking. He talked about our lives had become unmanageable, drunk or sober, because I was the manager. And John said, let's make step one real simple. Let's boil it down to two words. I can't. I can't drink, and I can't not drink by myself, and I can't run my life. So I can't. He said, now what about step two? I said, well, step two is just coming to believe in a power greater than yourself that can restore you to sanity. He said, what does that mean to you? By then, I'd heard enough people in AA give all kinds of definitions that I'd grab onto, repeating the same action, expecting different results. He said, that's partially true, but that ain't what the step says. He says, I came to believe that there was a power that could restore us to sanity. That means wholeness of mind with regards to alcohol, nothing else. He said, you're crazy as a shithouse rat, and you always will be. He said, I've watched you. And he pretty much told the truth. I'm 70 years old in August. I got a 33-year-old wife. That might be insane. I don't know. I've always done crazy things. He said, but that's not what the step's referring to. The step is referring to when that refrain goes through your mind. This time I can take a drink and things will be different. And I believe that. And I'd take that drink and sit and play that allergy, that phenomenon of craving, and I wouldn't be able to stop. He said, let's make step two real simple. If step one is I can't, why don't we make step two, he can? Whatever this power is. He said, and based with those two facts, he said, we're at step three. In the book it says we don't need to be convinced of anything else. A, that we were powerless over alcohol. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if he were sought. You know, I hear a lot of people saying they're trying to find God. I ain't trying to find him, you know. I seek him. I seek him through the actions you gave me. But he said, let's make step three real simple. I'll let him. And John got down on his knees. He said, we'll say this third step prayer. And John told me I didn't have to get on my knees. He said, there's nothing in the book that says you got to get on your knees. He said, I get down there because it reminds me of who I am and who he is. If you want to, you can. If you don't have to. At that time, I was comfortable enough where I got down on my knees. And he opened the book up, and we read the third step prayer out of the big book. And you know, I've read that prayer on a daily basis from that day through this morning. And I know I've got a good mind, and I've memorized I don't know how much stuff in my life, but that prayer is not committed to memory. Every morning when I read it or pray it, depending on my spiritual condition, when I utter those words, it's like it's the first time. And it's not like I'm taking the third step every day, because I'm not. All I'm doing is reaffirming that decision I made with John. I'll let him. And there's a funny thing about that prayer, too, and if you doubt me, check it out in the book. At the end of that prayer, it does not say amen. There is no amen in the book after that prayer until the end of step 7, which made me think about it. That means that everything from the end of step 3 through the conclusion of step 7 is a continuation of that prayer. The words were only a beginning of it. I mean, that's just for me. You take it any way you want it. And anything that I say that doesn't come out of the book, don't pay no attention to. You do what's working for you. But I'll try to just share with you what worked for me and what came out of the book Alcoholics Anonymous for me. We got off our knees, and John, he's a fast mover. He had a yellow legal tablet sitting there by his chair. He picked it up and gave it to me, and he said, now we're going to take an inventory. Now, I'd been in enough AA meetings where I heard, no, you're supposed to go to group therapy and talk to 4 or 5 people and maybe see a counselor or 2 and get some opinions. John said, the book don't say that. The book says, next. That means right away. He said, this step will have little or no lasting effect unless at once followed by a course of rigorous action, the first step of which is an inventory. And John said, that's what we're going to do. We're going to look and see what makes up J. He said, up in the upper left-hand corner, he gave me one of those yellow pencils with an eraser. But he gave me that pencil. He said, up in the upper left-hand corner, write down the word I resent. I looked at him like he was out of his mind. I said, John, I don't resent anybody. And I didn't. I didn't resent a soul. He said, write down I hate. Well, shit, I hated everybody. That ain't no problem. I pressed down so hard the pencil lead broke. He told me who to put down first. He said, put down Siraj. Siraj was my Indian partner from Sri Lanka. They'd made me bring him back to the States on a visa to watch out for their money. And I hated him. He said, put down why you hate him. I hated him for a lot of things. I hated him because he was sleeping in a bed and my little boy was sleeping on the floor. I hated him because he was eating raw meat and my wife and kids and I are eating rice and beans. I hated him because they got all my money and I was broke. I hated him because he wore a dress. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a dress. They called it a sari, but it looked like a dress. You put a skirt on a man, it's a damn dress. Put one on your husband, try and tell him it ain't a dress. But anyhow, I put down all the reasons, and John said they didn't have to mean anything to anyone. But if I felt it, put it down. If that's what I thought, put it down. And he said, now we'll go back through your life and put down everybody you hate and why you hate them, the reason why you hate them. And when I went back through my life, I found that there I was, a little boy, just walking or whatever, and I hated everybody. I hated my family. I hated everything that happened to me. I hated everything everybody had done to me. And I wrote it all down. I found out when I was a little boy, I was a liar. I was a liar when I started talking, not when I started go drinking. Nobody taught me how to lie. It came natural, sort of like a gift from God. With words, I could make myself into whatever you wanted me to be. If I watched a sports movie, I could become the greatest athlete in the world just with words. I've got a voice that's a little deep. I'm allowed to be 6 foot tall on the phone. And then they see this little dwarf coming off. But lying came natural. I was a thief as far back as I can remember. Now, being a thief didn't make me an alcoholic, just made me a thief. And I never did take nothing to deprive you. I took something to give it to somebody else. I may take something from you and I turn around and give it to him. And I do that so he'd say, Jay's a nice guy and we want him to hang around. And if one of you would have told me, explained to me that what I was trying to do was buy someone's attention or buy their affection, I would have argued about it. And yet that's what I was trying to do. And nobody taught me that. It just came natural. And I think that's the part of alcoholism. That does not mean that you have to lie and steal like I lied and stole to be an alcoholic. That just means that those are some of the characteristics that I had. And this is many years before I took a drink. So I had all this going on inside of me, and I went off to the first grade. Up there in Ohio, in northeast Ohio, we belonged to a certain faith, and I went to a parochial school. That means Catholic, and they had nuns. And Sister Lucy was my introduction to S&M. You have to picture her. Now I'm just this little old scared boy down there, and she wore this black robe. They wore black robes, went from their head down to their boots, and it had a white collar around it, and she had chains and leather hanging down her side. Now, it scared the hell out of me. And before I forget, I'll tell you a little more about Sister Lucy. I have a sister a year younger who's an Ursuline nun. Sister Lucy was an Ursuline nun. And that sister, by the way, will be celebrating 50 years of being a nun on the 4th of August up in Ohio, and I'm going to be up there to help her celebrate. But I got a chance about 15 years ago to go over to the mother house and see Sister Lucy. By then she was in her late 90s, and she just looked like a little bitty old angel. And yet my perception as a child was much different. And the perception is what made it real, not what she was. And that was what it was with everything in my life. It wasn't what happened, it was how I perceived it. So I go off to the first grade, and they told my family that I was pretty intelligent and I could go anywhere and do anything. And as soon as I heard that, my ability to learn stopped, and I started getting in trouble. And pretty soon I was hauled in front of the class as a class clown. I didn't want it to be that way. I wanted to be like the other kids. I wanted to get along with everybody, and I didn't. It was just getting worse and worse, and I started running away. By the time I was 8 or 9 years old, I got hauled in front of my first juvenile referee. That means judge, and he sent me off to an institution. It was an orphanage. Now, I wasn't no orphan, so it didn't make sense, but there wasn't no other orphans in there either. They were just all guys like me, punks. And they sent me off there trying to straighten me out so that I could become a productive human being. And I didn't know that. I thought they were punishing me. Again, my perception. They were doing it to me, not for me. And I stayed there a little while and got out and kept lying, stealing, and running, and got locked up again. And to make a long story short, I was to stay in one institution or another until I was 17 and a half years old. Nothing ever got better. It just got worse. And at 13, I made a decision that changed the course of my life. I was out on the streets for a short period of time, lying, stealing, and hustling, and decided to get a drink. And me and this other guy, we wasn't old enough. We was only 13. You had to be 21 in Ohio then to drink. I knew I didn't look old enough, so I stole some money from my mother's purse. That's where I always stole it from. I got an eyebrow pencil, and I give myself a beard and a mustache. Now, just sort of dotted it on. It was not as classy as Mike's, but it was nice. Just if it had rained, I'd just look like I had smeared blackheads, I guess. I don't know. But I headed down with this 5 o'clock shadow down to the lower end of 25th Street, which is a skid row. Every city's got a skid row. And I learned that's where you get something to drink. And we went in and out of enough gin mills, and finally they give us what we wanted. We got 2 bottles of mixed screwdrivers and 2 bottles of Thunderbird wine. I can only guess why we ordered the screwdrivers. It had a sexual connotation. I didn't know what it meant, but it sounded exciting. Thunderbird, I can tell you why we ordered it. There was a billboard at Scranton and 25th. It wasn't as pretty as these signs y'all have from the different groups, and they do look lovely, but it was a big billboard, I don't know, just huge. Had this bottle of Thunderbird on it with this bird just sort of soaring free. God, it looked good, and it was what I'd learned about Thunderbird in the places I'd been locked up. What's the word? Thunderbird! It promised shit was going to happen, I'll tell you that. Now, if you think I'm kidding, you try and do that with Muscatel. Ripple. No. And it was the price. It was always affordable. It was... What's the price? No, it was cheaper than 30 twice back then. It's so cheap now, if you can find it, it's always on the lowest shelf at a grocery store, like they're begging you to steal it. The good stuff is up here where they can keep their eyes on it. But we got that hooch and went out behind some bushes and we started to drink. And I don't remember what we started with or what we finished with. All I know is that once I started to drink, everything changed. and I wasn't even aware of it. But it had to be the most fantastic feeling that could ever come over a guy like me, because I pursued the recapturing of it at every opportunity for the next 17 and a half years. And I never got it back that way again. And I woke up the next morning in a way that I was going to wake up and over again until I got to you people. I woke up in a mess, and it was mine. I woke up with a new fear about me. Now, I didn't know it was a new fear. I just woke up afraid. I woke up not remembering the night before, what happened the night before after we started to drink. Again, if I was talking to one of you who had knowledge and you said, Jay, you had a blackout, I said, no, I didn't. I just don't remember. I didn't know that blackouts and not remembering were the same. And I accepted blackouts from the very beginning. I was telling somebody we were driving somewhere yesterday, and I said, said they were scared of blackouts. I said, not me, I loved them. When I was in a blackout, and that was a lot, I did not feel as though I was responsible for anything that happened, because I didn't remember it. Now today I know that I was and I am responsible. But in my mind, if I didn't remember it, I wasn't responsible. So I wasn't afraid of them. Blackouts were to give me a lot of problems as life went on. I'll get into that a little later with my wife, but I accepted them from the beginning. But that fear that was going on, it was just down in the pit of my stomach. And I didn't know anything about that fear while I was taking that inventory I started telling you about a little earlier. I had them people down who I hated and why I hated them. I put down, take that first guy, I put down how it affected me. It affected my sex life, because that was zip. It affected my security, because I was broke. And as I put those down, the way Bill had them lined out in the book, I did that with each and every one on that list. Then John said, now we're going to look at it from a different angle. We're going to put out of our minds the wrongs others have done, real or imagined, and look for our part in the wrong. And I looked at that guy, Siraj, and I put down what he had done to me and what they had done and what they had got from me. And I just hadn't done to him. I brought him from a third world country, introduced him to Kroger's, for God's sakes. He'd met a girl he later married. I just done, John said, why don't you ask God to help you? I said a little prayer. God, please help me find if I've done anything wrong or to harm this man. And I'll tell you what I found. Yeah, I'd brought him over to this country. My sole intention for bringing him over here was so I could get their money. They had a lot of money in Germany because they had another business, and my intent was to get their money, to get a hold of it, steal it. Once I saw my part in the wrong, I had no thought about him. When I brought him over, because of the laws we had broken, he would never be able to return home again. If he went back to Sri Lanka, he'd go to jail and he'd never get out. Normal life expectancy was only 5 or 6 years. He'd have died in jail. So I robbed him of seeing his family again because of my selfishness, because of my dishonesty, because of my not caring. And once I saw my part in the wrong in black and white, two things happened. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't want to go hug and kiss him, but I didn't hate him. And I also saw in black and white what the opposite was going to be that I was going to have to do to make it right when I got to steps 8 and 9. And that was the value of taking an inventory the way it's laid out in the book. And I was able to do that with each and every resentment on that list. There was no resentment where I was not able to find my part in the wrong. I was able to find my part in the wrong. I'd been molested as a child. My part in the wrong. Didn't tell anybody about it because I knew they wouldn't believe me. Didn't tell anybody about it because the one who was molesting me was giving me cigarettes. Look for my part in the wrong. Once I find it, it relieves me from that hate and anger. I hear people say, I can't forgive myself. Screw it. You're not supposed to forgive yourself. Forgive them. Feel God's forgiveness. With God's forgiveness, you know you're forgiven. Or that's my opinion. But got through with that part of the inventory, and John had me write down my fears. I put them down. I was afraid of heights. I was afraid of not being a good father, a good husband, a good engineer. I listed them all, and when I got all my fears down, John said, now we'll ask God to remove them. And I said a little prayer, and I said, God, please take these fears, because that's what the book says to do. He said that once we begin to outgrow fear, and I got off my knees and told John, I said, I'm still afraid. He said, what are you afraid of? I said, I don't know, I'm just afraid. And he opened the book up. You know, they hide stuff in that book. It's terrible. Bill talks about that fear of impending calamity. Hell, I didn't even know what those words meant. That's the fear that something bad's going to happen and you can't stop it. I knew that fear. I knew it at 13 years old when I woke up that morning. Something bad was going to happen and I couldn't stop it. And I saw how that fear, Bill calls it an evil and corroding thread, our lives are shot through with it. And I saw how that fear grew in me as time went on, from then until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous and after I got here. And I am firmly convinced had I not been able to be given a tool to deal with it, I'd have killed myself. I couldn't have lived with it any longer. There'd be times I'd come out of a blackout, or I'd come to, and the fear wouldn't be there. And then all of a sudden, bam, it'd come slamming back down on me. And I couldn't get rid of it. Just drink. And then John said, why don't you ask God to take it? And John gave me a simple prayer. It's a prayer I've used from that day to this day, not just with fear, but with any situation that I don't comprehend or that I don't understand. And the prayer is simply, God, please take it. I can't handle it. And I'll say that over and over like a mantra. God, please take it. I can't handle it. God, please take it. I can't handle it. God, please take it. I can't handle it. And whatever it is that's going on, whether it's a wife dying, a parent dying, me dying, whatever it is, all of a sudden I'm 20 miles down the road, or I'm waking up the next morning and that fear is gone because God's got it. And then it'll come back again. It'll come back again because I'm a human being. I'm not above human. It'll come back and I have to look at my life and say, what am I doing that I shouldn't be doing, or what am I not doing that I should be doing? And I'll uncover what that is and then give it to God. God, please take it. I can't handle it. God, please take it. I can't handle it. And it'll be gone again. So it isn't something that I can use once and it's gone. It's something that's a tool that I use in my life. But anyhow, I got through with that part of the inventory and did the sex part. That didn't take long. We always want to make it into something it ain't. It ain't. We all done the same things. I've heard, I don't know how many fifth steps, but so many things that animals and people can do. Don't mean to confuse the two. It's just, I know some people from Hog's Breath. But the book says, what do we do about sex? It does not say go to your group and ask a bunch of idiots what to do. It says we can talk with someone about them, that's fine. But we avoid hysterical advice. Some people say no flavor for your fare. Others will put you on an all-pepper diet. It said don't do that. It's fine to talk to somebody, but then ask God, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do in this situation, God? You know, I sponsor a lot of guys. I'm very blessed to have these men in my life. Some of them like men, some of them like women, some don't like no one. I don't care. I'm not there as a judge. The book says we are not the judge. They use another word, but it means judge. We are not the judge of anyone's conduct. It's none of our damn business. What my business is to share with you what I have to do in order not to take a drink today. But I got that inventory down, and John had said, right now, write down a standard. He had to write down a sexual standard, and I did. It was a 2-page document. It was beautiful. I swear to God, it should have been printed and put in the Smithsonian. John took one look at it, ripped it up, and threw it away. He said, what's this crap? Who are you trying to impress? He said, ask God for help, and I did, and I wrote down a standard that I could live by. Because to that point in my life, I had no standard. The only standards I ever had were what I thought you wanted from me. And I had to have a standard that was good with God and good with me. And I wrote down a standard. And that gave me a foundation. And I said that was many, many years ago, and that foundation has still remained in place, and it has changed and grown as I have been willing to listen to what God wants for me. But you got to have something to begin with. And don't try this stuff on your own. Have a sponsor who's gone before you and done this stuff. Not someone who's read some damn book or been to some $18,000 book treatment center, but someone who's applied these steps to their life. How did they change? What did they do? That's what John shared with me, what he did, not what I needed to do. He never told me, you got to do this. He said, this is what I did. And that's what the men and women in Alcoholics Anonymous have done ever since. But anyhow, there I was, 13 years old, and had all that stuff going on. I told you I got locked up some more, and then I went in the Navy. I ran away from the last reformatory, got a wino to sign me into the Navy, lasted 6 months, and got thrown out. I was on a ship called the Antietam down in the Gulf of Mexico. I went ashore, I took a drink, and I woke up a day or two later in a room maybe the size of this part of the gym. It was the nut ward of the Naval Hospital in Pensacola, Florida. They called me before board officers, and they gave me a paper, and they said, sign this. I said, what is it? They said, it's a guarantee that you'll never attempt to re-enlist in any of the armed forces, and with that, you'll get an honorable discharge. If you don't sign it, we're going to court-martial you. Hell, I signed it. There wasn't no question. That's over 50 years ago. I ain't never been back. I've kept my word. They give me what little money I had coming, and I left there, and I headed up to Ohio. I hadn't seen my parents in a while. They needed to see their son. So I bought a car on the way up there. Now, I didn't have a license, so I got a car first. It was a Studebaker. Now, a lot of you don't know what a Studebaker is. Look at it on the internet. It's pointed on both ends. You know if it's coming or going. I'd never driven. It was stick shift, so I'd learn fast. I got up there on my 18th birthday, and I was celebrating my birthday with what little money I had and this new car. And by then, I did get a license. I went in somewhere and got a license. Now, not registration or insurance or nothing like that. I just put a sign on it, just bought or something. I don't know. And I woke up the next morning like I woke up the last time I took a drink. I woke up in that mess, woke up with that fear, woke up with that thing about not remembering what happened the night before after I started to drink. And the room I was in was a little different. It was a jail, and they came and let me out of that jail. And they gave me a stack of tickets. It started off with drunk driving, leaving the scene of an accident, no insurance. It finished up with assaulting an officer. I inspected myself carefully in the mirror. If I hit that cop, it was with my face. My hands were just nothing wrong. And I always, whenever I got tickets, they always had assaulting an officer, but I never had no bruises on my hands. So I'm thinking, again, a victim of circumstances. They took my license away. I only had it a day and a half, and it's gone. And I'd like to tell you that I quit driving. That was the end of it. That'd be a lie. I kept driving. I just went to different states. And I had licenses from almost every state in the United States. Not Wyoming or Colorado, but I mean, I've had them Washington, Oregon, California, Texas, New Mexico. I just get a license. They'd catch me with that one, I'd get another one. And I was driving an ambulance one time in West Palm Beach, Florida, saving lives, trying to help people. And they arrested me for drunk driving and hit skip. I'm trying to help people. See, I told you, victim of circumstances and bad timing. People was picking on me. So my driving career wasn't real good. My naval career wasn't real good. Lasted a little over 6 months. Driving career less than that. But then I got out of that jail and I went over to my mother's house. And they told that old beat-up Studebaker there. And as I walked in, I asked her where my keys were. I said, you can't drive. I said, I didn't ask you about if I could drive. Where's my keys? But she's sitting there and she's crying. I looked over and I said, what's wrong? And my sister, the one that had just joined the Ursuline convent, was there, and Linda, and she was trying to console my mother. And my mother told me what was wrong. She said, you know, your daddy's an alcoholic. He drank himself out of the radio business. He drank himself down to Skid Row. And he got sober in January that year. And he'd been sober 7, 8 months. She said, and he hadn't had a drink, and he's working, and our lives are changing. She said, my mom was 50 or 51 at the time. Dad was a couple years older. She said, and I'm blessed. She said, I felt blessed. She said, God has blessed us with a child, and I'm pregnant. She said, and I'm crying right now, and I'm praying that this child inside of me will be born dead rather than be born a son like you. And I thought to myself, you bitch. And I hated her. And I got them keys and I left. You know, how many times have I said, or maybe have we said, the only one I'm hurting is me. But as I look back through my life and I look at the way I've hurt people, I've hurt everybody with whom I've come in contact. It isn't the money I stole from them. What about their love? What about their hope? What about their wants? But anyhow, I got them keys and got that car, and I decided I'd read a book about the merchant marine and working on ships, merchant ships, and decided that's what I'd do, and I joined the merchant marine. I went out on the West Coast, went to a union hall. They sent me to the Coast Guard. I got some papers, and I shipped out and went out on my first ship. We went to Japan. I went ashore. The captain came and got me 3 days later. Brought me up to the ship's bridge, and he put me in the logbook. That doesn't mean I was being honored. It meant I was being fired. But the nice thing about being fired on a ship that many thousand miles away from the States is they can't make you walk home. There was a bunch of guys on that ship. All of them drank. Many of them just, guys like me, but a lot older. And as professionals. And they explained to me, they said, don't worry about getting fired. We all get fired or quit anyhow. We had 300 or 400 ships under union agreement. You signed 1-year articles whenever you got on a ship, and a normal voyage was 3 months to a year. You didn't have to be a mathematical genius to figure out 3 months to a year times 300 or 400 ships. I'd be one old guy before I run out of jobs, because they couldn't refuse you on one ship for getting fired on another one. These guys told me that, so I felt secure in my employment. And I was. And we got back to the States and got to San Pedro, California. I got off that ship, and back then they paid in $100 bills. And they give me this stack of $100 bills, because they don't give you that much money on the ship. You get 10% of your wages and the rest when you get off. And I got off that ship with a handful of money, more money than I'd ever seen before. Went to a store, bought some clothes, went to a bar and started to drink. When I ran out of money, I got back on another ship. And things kept getting worse. I had the rules of my drinking that many of you might have had. Not going to drink here, not going to drink this. But I keep changing the rules to fit the needs. And things kept getting worse. And then I made a study. I said, well, if I get a license, things will get better. So I became a licensed officer in the Merchant Marine. I became a third engineer. And things kept getting worse. I wasn't no officer and a gentleman, that's for damn sure. And I decided what was wrong was I was just a playboy. I was a single guy. I'd get a lot of money. I'd spend it. I had no responsibility. If I'd get married, have a wife, kids, a little picket fence, everything would be wonderful. So I was sitting in a bar one day shopping for a wife, and she walked in. James and Terry and a few others might remember her. Her name was Vaughn. This is in 1964, and Vaughn walked in, sat down right next to me. She's just a little bitty girl, first girl I've seen smaller than me, and she looked madder than me. She had a black eye and a fat lip and choke marks on her neck. I looked over at her and said, can I buy you a drink? And she looked at me with just disgust, and she said, I don't drink and don't like people that do. So I hauled all them $100 bills out, because I just got off that ship, sort of smeared them out on a bar, and I began to lie, and she began to listen. And I found out why she is so mad. She's mad because she had 2 children. She had a little baby that was 4 years old, another little girl that was just born, and a husband that beat her badly and had deserted her before, and had deserted her a couple days before this, and was never coming back and never has. And she hated men, and she hated anything to do with alcohol. She tells, if she were here to tell you, she'd say, after a lengthy courtship, I proposed to her. I thought it was 20 minutes. She says it was 10. Well, real alcoholics understand you take a long time with important decisions. 20 minutes is a long time. That was 1964 in September. Make a long story short, on October 14, 1965, her divorce became final in West Palm Beach, Florida. On October 15, 1965, we got married. We got married at the Candlelight Flower Shop on Congress Avenue, right across from the farmer's market. I'd fallen on some hard times, so I didn't have the money I used to have. I mean, I hadn't been on a ship, and she'd had me on this enforced period of sobriety. In other words, if I drank, she wasn't going to be with me. So I just didn't drink for a while. We have those periods, and earlier in our alcoholism, when we can just not drink for a period for the right reason. So I didn't drink, and I bought them rings over at the farmer's market, and I finally got the woman that ran the flower shop. She was just at a piece. For $20, she hummed "Here Comes the Bride." Vaughn got 2 wilted roses, and we got married. Had 2 witnesses. It wasn't a joke. Now, I say it in a humorous way, but the reality is, in my family, there had never been a divorce. I didn't know what divorce was. I'd heard about it, but I didn't know firsthand about it. And I just figured you got married, you got married. And I didn't think about the responsibility of the 2 children and all the things that come with a marriage. I just thought you got married. I remember little Ricky hanging onto my pant leg, looking up at me and saying, "Please be my daddy." And God, I wanted to be his daddy. I had not had a daddy growing up. I had a father. And I wanted to be his daddy. I remember holding Kim and swearing how I was going to be her daddy. And I could just picture her life and what I do as her daddy. And the little girl I was marrying, Bon, I knew I was going to be a loving, faithful, good husband. If one of you would have told me that because of my alcoholism, I was incapable of that I was powerless, I'd have said you're crazy. Because I thought that drive inside of me, that will, that want, that power would sustain me and allow me to do it. And we got married and left that little chapel and went over to her aunt's house where they had a little thing, and they gave me a glass. It was a glass of punch. I hate punch. The only way I'd ever drink punch if it was full of vodka or gin. But they give me a glass of punch, and I spit it out, and I grabbed my new wife, the same one I'd taken these vows with that I meant. Grabbed my new wife, we got in this old car we had, Ford or Chevy, whatever it was, and headed on down from West Palm to Miami for a 2-day honeymoon. I stopped at a liquor store, and I bought me a big bottle of liquor and began to drink to celebrate our wedding. And she wouldn't drink, and I wanted someone to drink with me, so I got a guy on the side of the road. He was just a bum. Picked him up, and we passed the bottle back and forth across my new wife. And I woke up the next morning the same way I woke up every time I picked up a drink by then. I woke up in a mess, and it was mine. I woke up with that new fear inside of me, getting bigger and bigger. I woke up not remembering what happened the night before. And she's laying there next to me, and she's crying. And I don't mean tears just to mess up the mascara. I'm talking about that deep down sobbing that every man and woman in this room has either experienced by listening to or doing. And when you hear that deep, racking sobbing, you look over and you want to do anything you can to stop it. And I looked at her and I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I've lived this way before and I will not live this way again." And with all the honesty and sincerity that I could muster, I looked at her and I swore to her, if she'd just give me one more chance, that this would never happen again. And she believed me. As I said, that was in 1965. We were to have almost 9 more years of that, getting worse and worse every day, every month, every year. I wanted it to get better, and it got worse. I'd worked on ships. I stayed on ships. I'd come home. I'd write her letters every day, tell her that I loved her, how things would be different. She'd meet the ship. I'd meet the plane that I'd fly in from. Everything was fine. She'd have that smile on her face and the kids with her. And until I got close enough, she could smell that I was drinking or drunk. And the hope went out of her eyes like it poured ice water on her. And things would get worse. I'd ship out again. It kept getting worse. A child was born to this marriage in 1968, Jay the third. I remember nothing at all about him. He looks a spitting image of me. I know he's mine. But I don't remember anything about his birth. I remember nothing. My drinking continued to progress. I got in trouble with the union. 1973, I was blackballed out of the union. The Coast Guard took my papers away. They said that I was unfit to sail. You know, throwing someone out of the merchant marine is sort of like getting thrown out of jail. Back then, it's changed now. It's a lot stricter, but, they took it away and said I couldn't go to sea. That was 1973. On March the 7th of 1974, I found myself knocking on a man's back door 1,200 miles away from where we lived. The only thing I knew about this man was that he used to drink and he didn't drink anymore. And he answered the door, and the first words out of my mouth were, "I think I have a problem drinking." I have no idea where that came from. I do now, but I didn't then. It just came out. And he chuckled. He knew a little chuckle we have in AA, and yeah, that one. took me back to his office and set me down on a couch, and he pulled out a copy of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, open it up, and I did. And on a flyleaf there were some words written in ink. It said, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, God will help. And it was signed, Love, Dad. My dad had been going to Alcoholics Anonymous, I guess at that time it was almost 14 years, 15 years, and he hadn't had a drink. And he did what you people told him to do. And he'd come to you and he'd whine to you about me. What about my son? He's killing himself. What about my son? He's destroying his family, ruining his career, literally dying. And you did not tell him to intervene or interfere. You told him, leave him alone. Don't say nothing because he won't listen to you. He never has. Why would he now? And if you say something to him, you might stop a chance for him coming to you at a later time. Be an example of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what he was. But he said to me, he said, come with me. We'll go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, no, I wouldn't go because I was drunk. That was on March the 7th. And he wrote 2 numbers down on a piece of paper. And he said, tomorrow morning, he said, when you wake up, if you wake up, and you might not, you might be dead. But if you wake up, and if you would rather be sober than be drunk, call one of these numbers before you take a drink, and then meet me at 7 and we'll go to a meeting. I don't know what I did that night. I just know that I drank, because that's all I did by then was drink. There was always a drink there. I never went to bed without a drink next to me. I never got up without a drink to drink. And I came to or woke up the next morning and there was a drink next to me. But there was something different. As badly as I physically needed that drink, as badly as I wanted that drink, I didn't want to drink just a little bit more. You know, the slogans we see around our meeting rooms, there's one that really always touches me. It says, but for the grace of God. I know today what grace means. Grace comes from a Latin word that means merciful gift. And I believe God's merciful gift to me, unasked for by me, was that gift of a desire not to drink that was stronger than that almost overwhelming need to drink. But I believe it was given to me as it was given to each of you with the same responsibility, that I do all that I can to keep it, or I could lose it. That first day I didn't do much, I just didn't drink. She took me to the hospital. They told her that I had to get a shot. So when I'm sicker than the devil, and she takes me to the hospital, and they have needles. They're about that long, and they're sort of square. And if you look in the mirror, on your left cheek, there's a mark. So the nurse knows where to hit it. It was vitamin B12. It wasn't this crap they give today. It was vitamin B12. And they said it helped me. It helped my nerves. I don't know if it helped my nerves or not. It hurt like hell, but I didn't have to drink. And then they told her, they said, give him honey and orange juice, that'll do what alcohol does. It'll help him withdraw from alcohol. They had talked about taking me to a hospital or a detox, and the old-timers had said, no, don't. Let him be sick. He'll remember being sick. He won't remember. He's getting sober easy. Now, she and I didn't get along, and she didn't get honey. She got Karo syrup. Now, Kent knows what that is, but you take Karo syrup and mix it in orange juice in the beginning of March in Ohio, it's like frozen road tar. It'll cut your damn throat going down, I'll tell you that. And every time I'd open my mouth, she poured that crap in me. And then they told her if he gets irritable, give him some candy. The sugar in the candy will help him to withdraw. She got this big sack of sour balls. My mouth sucks back every time. She hadn't learned a damn thing about love and tolerance, I'll tell you that. If you're working with a newcomer, peanut clusters, chocolate-covered cherries, Hershey bars, not sour balls. But anyhow, that day, I didn't call them numbers. I had them in my pocket. I met my daddy that night. We went to a meeting, and it was a meeting like this, smaller, but like this, with people just like you. And we come to the front door of that place to go in. There was a guy standing outside. He had a baseball cap on and a Levi jacket, smoking a cigarette. He just looked almost like a bum. But he stuck his hand out as I'm walking by. And I just took his hand. And my father said, that's Jimmy, and he's your sponsor. And I got this guy holding on to my hand. And he said, my name's Jimmy, and I'm glad to meet you. And I pray to my God that I never forget that or the way that I felt. I can remember his handshake like it was just a minute ago. It was firm, and it was warm, and it was dry. I know what my hand felt like because I was a new guy. My hand was cold and sweaty and scared. And he said he was glad to meet me. Something inside just said he was. And then we went inside and he started to talk to me. He started to talk to me about Alcoholics Anonymous and about him. He did not talk to me about me. He didn't tell me how I smelled, how I looked. He talked to me about himself. We should not have gotten along. He was a hillbilly from West Virginia. He worked in an auto factory up in Cleveland. We had nothing in common, not religion, not politics, nothing. But as he shared with me about his alcoholism, we had everything in common. He told me what happened with his family, where it went, where he went, how it got worse. And then he told me he'd found Alcoholics Anonymous and he hadn't had a drink. It was 4 or 5 years. And then the meeting started and some guy told his story. I remember nothing about it. All I remember about that meeting is I laughed. I don't remember laughing for a long, long time. But I remember that laugh, that I was able to laugh. And I'm convinced of something. You can take all the inventories you want. You can see all the therapists you want. But if you start to learn how to laugh, you're going to start to get better. Something happens when you laugh. When you laugh, endorphins get loose. Now, they don't make you horny. They just get loose. They make you feel good. When endorphins get loose, you can't think. You can't be mad. They're loose. There's only 2 ways to get them loose. Laugh. Well, 3 ways. Laugh, take chemicals, or run. Now, you want to run 26 miles to get endorphins loose, that's fine. I'd rather laugh. I'm lazy. And jokes, how many of you thought when you were laughing? You didn't think, you laughed. You felt good. That's what endorphins do. They're feel-good stuff inside of you. So anyhow, I remember that from the meeting, and then he introduced me to them guys, and all these guys were shaking my hand and saying, keep coming, kid, you'll be all right. Keep coming, kid, things will get better. I'll tell you about a couple of them. There's a guy named Frank Turk. Frank Turk was from the Near East Side. He was sober at that time about 30 years. I knew it was a damn lie, but he was old. Had a gravelly voice, he was old, he was tall. He shook my hand and he said, good to see you, kid, keep coming, you'll be all right. And he said, by the way, this is Joe or Peter, whoever, some guy I had with him. And he said, he's got 2 weeks, and I sponsor him. Now, that's the guy I wanted to talk to. How do you stay sober 2 weeks? 30 years is a lie. 2 weeks is something I get my head around. You know, Frank died. He's been dead a while now. When Frank died, last time I saw him a few years ago, I was up in Cleveland at a meeting, and I saw Frank, and he's still old and still had a gravelly voice. He shook my hand and said, good to see you, kid. Everything's going to be all right. And he said, by the way, this is Pete or Joe or whatever. He said, he's new. He's got 8 days. He said, and I sponsor him. I began to talk to that kid. And I looked over at Frank and I said, Frank, you're sober near 60 years. You got to be 90 years old. You're still sponsoring guys? He said, kid, I don't want to. He said, but I can't drive no more. I need drivers, for Christ's sake. There was another guy named Earl that was there. Earl was this little mouthy guy, and Earl looked at me and said real snotty like, kid, you'll never make it, and he went off. I was ought to slap him. But, you know, everyone else telling me keep coming, he said, I ain't going to make it. My dad died in 1981. Died after a long bout with cancer, and it was a miserable death, and I went to his funeral, and the funeral home was full for 2 days, and while I was there, during that funeral, a bunch of these AA guys were around me and talking with me, and Earl come up to me. Earl said to me, he said, hey, Jay, he said, I want to tell you something. He said, do you remember your first meeting? I said, yeah, I do, and I've resented you ever since. He said, I came in and I've AA since 1945. Every time I came back, they'd say, keep coming, you'll be all right. He said, when I came back in 1962, the last time I came back, he said, there was a guy at the door, this arrogant, intellectual guy, and he said, Earl, why waste your time? You ain't never going to make it. He said, and I stayed sober for the next 2 years on hate for that sumbitch alone. He said, that man was your daddy. All Earl wanted from me, what was given to him, he didn't want me to have to take a drink. It was all done with love. I just couldn't see it. Anyhow, Jimmy talked to me that night, and he gave me the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've got about 10 more minutes, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell you about the first couple meetings. After that meeting, he told me the miracle. He said, how do you feel, kid? And I said, I'm scared. I'd never said that to another man before. I said, and I'm sick. He said, I will make you a promise. If you do 3 things on a daily basis, I will guarantee that you will never have to come off another drunk. He said, will you do it? And I said, sure. What are they? He said, number 1, I want you to say, in the morning when you get up, God, please help me not take a drink today. Number 2, if you can, go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, now you're a seaman and you'll go back to sea, and there may be periods of time when you can't go. But if you can, go. And then number 3, when you go to bed at night, you simply say, God, thank you for another sober day. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, will you do it? And I said, Jimmy, I can go to meetings, but I can't pray. By then, the church of my youth was gone. Any semblance of belief in anything was gone. He said, kid, I didn't ask you to pray. I just asked you to say words. He said, you ain't got to mean them. All you got to do is say them. And I agreed. He took me home that night late, and then next day he's picking me up and taking me to a meeting, and he didn't ask me what my schedule was. He just said, I'm picking you up. I mean, I was up there for 2 weeks, staying sober a day at a time, and we're on our way to a meeting the second day, and he said, looked over at me and he said, have you had a drink since last night? And I said, well, no. Well, hell, he knew I hadn't. He called me at 6, so I get that damn shot. Called to make sure I was getting enough Karo syrup and orange juice, enough of them sour balls. Called me at 8, called me at 10, 12, 2, and 4. Then picked me up at 7. I couldn't drink. He was always right there. But I didn't say that to him. You'd have thought I won the Powerball. He said, man, that's fantastic. I thought he'd lost his mind. He said, you know you've just stayed sober the absolute longest period of time you ever got to stay sober? Now, I knew he was nuts. What about Christmas? He said, one day. He said, all we do this is one day at a time. We don't do it 30 and 30 or 90 and 80 or 70 and 20 or whatever. We do it one day at a time, and you've just done it. Now you do tomorrow what you did today. And Jim and I went to meetings every night for the next 2 weeks, and I'm getting ready to go back to Florida where our home was, and we'd gone to a meeting that night, and on the way home for that meeting, I looked over at Jimmy and said, Jimmy, I still don't believe in this God nonsense. It's just a bunch of crap. He said, tonight was the first time you'd done anything in Alcoholics Anonymous other than drink the coffee and eat the donuts. What was it? As I read the traditions, he said, before you read them, what did you say? I said, I'm Jay and I'm an alcoholic. And he asked me if I believed that I was, and I really did. I accepted by then that I had this thing in my head and this allergy of the body. And he said, well, I know you are. I wanted to make sure you knew you were. He said, have you been doing what I told you every morning and every night? And I was honest with him. I said, yes, I had. I've been saying, God, help me not drink today. And I've been saying, thank you, God, for a sober day. But I don't mean it. There's days I'll say, God, help me not drink today. And I'm thinking about drinking. There's nights I'll go to bed and I'll say, thank you for a sober day. And I don't wish it. It's been such a crappy day. I wish I'd have been drunk. And he laughed. He said, thinking ain't drinking. He said, check the book out. There's no chapter into thinking. Drinking is drinking. Thinking is just thinking. Don't waste your time with shit that ain't in the book. That slogan you see about think, 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 I think that came from Al-Anon. I ain't sure. That ain't a knock on Al-Anon now. Don't attack me. But anyhow, then he asked me a question that changed my life. He said, so you've been doing what I told you every morning and every night. You don't mean it and you don't believe it. How long have you been doing that? Well, I knew to the second, whether it was 14 days or 13, I rattled it right out. And he said, when was the last time you've been this long, a day at a time, without taking a drink? And an awareness came over me. It wasn't no burning bush. It wasn't no vision. It was an awareness that there was a power greater than I, that was personal to me, that had not only allowed me but helped me not take a drink a day at a time for that unbelievably long number of days. And from the birth of that power, it's grown into a power that has changed my life. Through the application of the steps to my life changed. Every one of the promises that have been read at many of the meetings we go to have happened in my life. The physical things that happen to me have changed. My life has changed. It's fantastic. Got to tell you about a couple of them. You know, that wife, she's fantastic. She died in 2000, July 12th. She died after a long illness. The last 4 years or 5 years of her life, I was able to care for her like a baby. I was able to change her and bathe her and take care of her. Didn't have nurses. I did it because I learned how to be a loving and faithful husband. That doesn't make me a hero. It just made me help make amends and be sober. She died on July 12th, and as she died, I held her and I said that I loved her. And I said, I wish I'd have been a better husband. And she looked up at me, and with just the barest strength she had, she hugged me and she said, I thank God for giving you to me as a husband, and I love you. That is not a sad story. That's the story of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, I thought you were waving. My dad and I, Dad died in 1981. Dad didn't let any of us see him. He was dying of his cancer, and he avoided us all. And I'd asked my sponsor, what should I do? And he said, you be a loving son. And be a loving son meant allow my dad to die with dignity and not try and interfere with his death or his life. And I got a card on my birthday a few days later, my 7th day birthday, and I opened it up, and I couldn't read it. It was just scribbles. And a letter fell out from my mom. And the letter explained the card. It said, your dad wanted to communicate with you on your AA birthday. He said this cancer is beating him so badly that he just doesn't want to try and communicate with any of the children. He said, but it was important that you know what he was trying to do. He'd taken himself off all medication, and he tried to write a letter to me on the card. And she said as he tried to write, his hands wouldn't work with his mind. And she said, but it's important you know what he was trying to say, because all I could read was love, Dad. It said, congratulations, son, on your AA birthday. He said, what a glorious and wonderful day. He said, and how can we ever be grateful enough to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and for all that it's given us? For it's given us a loving God that's returned a lost son and rediscovered a lost father. And I knew at that moment that everything was okay between me and Dad and God. The amend had been complete. Mom died in 1999. She died of diabetes after many operations. I've been up to see her. This was the mother that I hated for praying that son would be dead that was going to be born. When I got to the amends, on that Tuesday I took an inventory. By Friday I was calling to make amends. My amends were to be a loving son. It wasn't to go over the things I had done wrong, but to be a loving son, because my wrong had been I was a lousy son. And I called her that Saturday, and I just said, Mom, this is Jay. And I just wanted to say hello. She said, I know who it is. I said, I'll call you next Saturday. I got to go. That was in 1975 when I was to call my mother on a weekly basis from then until her death. No matter where I was in the world, I sent a telegram or called every week, besides writing letters. And I learned how to be a loving son. And I've been up to see her a number of times, and I got back home from somewhere, and my sisters had called and said that Mom was dying and wanted to see me one more time. And I flew up to Cleveland and went to the Parma Hospital and went into that room where she was and dying. And the room was dark, and there were nurses there and doctors there and my sisters there, my kid brother there. And the room lit up with her smile like you put a searchlight on. And the nurse looked over and said, Rita, this must be your son you were telling us about. And my mom said with the greatest love and pride in her voice, she said, yeah, that's my son Jay. And you know he's the best son a mother could ever ask for. And he loves me. And I knew everything was okay with her and I. You gave me that by not letting me say I was sorry, but by telling me to be able to be a loving son. I got a lot more to tell you, but I ain't gonna. I've gone too long now. But I'm gonna close with this. God is everything in my life. I wish I'd talked a little less about drinking, a little more about my relationship with God and how he has brought me from that kid that hated everything and everybody to the point where I am now, where the world is wonderful. My God loves me and my God loves you. And I'll ask you to do this for me. Think about Alcoholics Anonymous and all that it's given us. Think about the men that gave it to other men, that gave it to other men and women, who gave it to you, who gave it to me. And let's not do nothing to screw it up or try and change it, but to leave it just the way it was when we got it. So that there's a place for a drunk like you or me to go to that's got nowhere else to go. Thank you so much for my God and the opportunity.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.